Have you ever come back to your own ranch, only to find the gate welded shut with steel, a sign that reads "No Entry HOA Property" standing proud in your path, and a group of strangers laughing like they'd just won a war? I have. But what they didn't know was this. I didn't just own the road leading to the ranch. I owned the entire valley they were living in, and when an HOA dares to build fences on my land, they're not just making a mistake. They're signing their own financial death warrant. I'm not the kind of man who angers easily. 20 years in the military taught me restraint, calculation, and to strike only when it counts. But that morning, as I turned onto the dirt road leading to my family ranch, the place I was born, the land where my grandfather once rode the fence line on horseback, and saw a welded steel fence sealing off my front gate, my heartbeat thundered in my skull. My pickup skidded over, the red clay, dust swirling like smoke. I jumped out. Ranger, my black lab, lifted his head and growled from the passenger seat as I strode toward the brand new sign posted dead center on the gate. HOA zone, no trespassing, members only. They were talking about my land, 600 acres, passed down through generations of my family, far beyond the jurisdiction of any damn homeowners association. And yet here I stood, barred from the very ground I had poured sweat, blood, and memory into. I laid my hand on the steel bar. Fresh, cold, solid as a bunker wall. My boots felt nailed to the dirt as I read the name etched at the bottom of the sign. Carl Hopkins, President, Twin Pines HOA. That bastard. I remembered him well. The clean-cut, neatly tucked, sunglasses in the shade type who lived in the first mansion inside the Twin Pines development, just 300 feet from my dirt road. He showed up at my house 2 months ago with a clipboard and a smile as thin as dishwater. Said the HOA was reviewing jurisdiction of adjacent undeveloped parcels. I laughed in his face. You've got the wrong gate, pal. But now he'd answered back, with steel and concrete. I took a deep breath and stepped back. Part of me wanted to grab the oxyacetylene torch right then and there. But no. I wouldn't just cut through their fence. I'd rip out the very foundation they stood on. I returned to my truck. Ranger let out a low bark, as if he could feel what was coming. I pulled out my phone, not to call the police. I called my land broker. It's Sam Walker. I want the full report on who owns the parcels next to Twin Pines HOA, the ridge behind them. The field is full of weeds, that old grain lot next to their water treatment plant. Can I buy it? I hung up. The morning sun burned across my face, and I told myself, all right, Hopkins, you want to play power games? I'll buy the dirt under your feet, and when I'm done, you'll pay triple for every breath you take. The next morning, I drove into town to cool my head and figure out my next move. Staring down that steel barricade the night before had lit something inside me. Rage, yes, but also purpose. I'd seen standoffs before, 2 decades in the Army, taught me that when someone tries to box you in, it means they're scared. Carl Hopkins and his clipboard crew were scared of something. I just had to find out what. At the local diner, I was halfway through my coffee when a knock hit my table. I looked up. A guy in khakis, HOA badge clipped to his belt, standing there like he had something official to say. Mr. Walker? He asked. Depends who's asking, I replied, keeping my voice calm but cold. He introduced himself as Jared, compliance liaison for Twin Creeks HOA. He smiled like a guy who just got promoted at the DMV. From his back pocket, he pulled out a thick packet and slid it across my table. Your registration documents. We're formally inviting you to join the HOA as part of our expanded zone. I didn't touch the packet. You people just welded a barricade across my private gate, and now you want me to register? He smirked like it was all part of the game. That was just a precautionary measure during the assessment phase. The board already voted unanimously to include Rocking W Ranch in our community plan. I opened the packet slowly. It was a binder, maybe 40 pages thick. Community access fees, structural conformity clauses, livestock odor thresholds. I skimmed page after page. They wanted to dictate everything, from how I used my land to what kind of paint I could put on my barn. There was even a fine structure laid out, $500 per non-compliant structure. My cattle pens alone would bankrupt me under these rules. Is this a joke? I asked. Jared adjusted his collar. Mr. Hopkins believes in full integration. We're all about harmony and standards. I pushed the packet back toward him. Tell Hopkins this. My land's not part of his sandbox and I didn't ask to play. Jared straightened up. Non-compliance will result in escalated enforcement. I'd advise cooperation. I stood, leaned in. You ever welded a barricade across a military outpost supply road, Jared? His smirk vanished. That's not enforcement. That's an act of aggression. Back at the ranch, I pulled out the original land plat from the county archives. My grandfather filed it in 1952. That dirt road? Private access easement. The HOA wasn't even a concept when this land was carved out. That's when I saw the fine print in their registration documents. They weren't even fully incorporated. Their expanded zone hadn't been approved by the county yet. They were bluffing, bullying, trying to preempt approval by seizing control. That same afternoon, I drove to the county clerk's office. The woman at the front desk knew me, small town perks, and when I explained what was happening, she looked shocked. They welded your gate shut? She asked. Welded it, bolted it, and plastered a sign like they own the sky. I filed a formal complaint right then. But I didn't stop there. I asked to see the full zoning applications for Twin Creeks HOA. Turns out their territorial review was still pending, hadn't even made it past the first review board. So why were they acting like the land was already theirs? I had my answer within an hour. Turns out Twin Creeks wasn't just expanding, they were marketing. A new brochure had just hit the real estate office downtown, offering exclusive ranch-adjacent homes with private nature access. And the map? It showed Rocking W Ranch as part of their master plan. They were planning to wrap my land into their narrative and sell it like some kind of amenity. My blood boiled. That's when I made a decision. If they thought they could just take over, maybe it was time I took over first. Because see, what they didn't know, what Carl Hopkins never bothered to check, was that I'd already made a deal last year with the state land board to acquire mineral rights on the acreage surrounding Twin Creeks, and that deal gave me first rights of refusal on the buffer lots that connected their community to the highway. I wasn't just going to tear down their fence. I was going to box them in and send them the bill for every breath they took on land I owned. I couldn't sleep that night. Not from fear, but because one question kept circling in my mind. How dare they? How could a group of people who've lived in their polished-up community for not even a decade believe they had the right to block off land my family has worked for 5 generations? The next morning, I drove my old F-250 straight to the Maricopa County Land Office, a place I knew well from my military days overseeing base construction projects. I didn't come just to look at maps. I came to dig, and I wasn't disappointed. I started with the records on the dirt road the HOA had just blocked. A small trail connecting the highway through the back of Twin Creeks, across my land to the cattle fields in the west. But the 1964 survey maps made one thing very clear. That road was a public easement, legally protected access recorded when my grandfather deeded a portion for fire crews and livestock to pass. The HOA didn't own that road. They never did, but that wasn't even the biggest surprise. I noticed something strange. The land where they built that steel fence, they had actually constructed it within a state-designated ecological buffer zone, meaning they hadn't just blocked the wrong land. They'd illegally built on protected soil. I squinted at the paperwork. A plan started to form. That evening, I sat on my porch with Ranger, sipping thick black coffee, staring toward that still-standing fence. The yellow glow of Twin Creeks spilled over the dry oak limbs. From where I sat, the place looked like a smug little fortress of ignorance and entitlement. I thought to myself, if they want to play legal games, I'll rewrite the rules. The next day, I reached out to an old friend, Miguel, who now worked in property management. I asked him to find me a list of landowners surrounding the HOA. He didn't disappoint. Turns out nearly a third of the land bordering Twin Creeks to the south and west belonged to old owners no longer living in Arizona, and most were looking to sell. I started calling them one by one. "Hello, I'm Randy Walker, owner of Rocking W Ranch. I'd like to buy your parcel at market price. Fast cash, no haggling, no red tape." I closed on the first lot within 3 days. Within 2 weeks, I had acquired every southern and western parcel around the HOA. And more importantly, I owned the only road leading in from the highway. They had no way out, except across land I now owned, and I wasn't done. I hired a private investigator to look into Carl Hopkins, the man behind the welded gate. Carl wasn't exactly a peaceful man. Before his HOA reign, he'd been sued for harassment. At an ad firm in Phoenix, the case had been buried under a hefty settlement, but the record still existed. I didn't plan to use it, unless he forced my hand. I also began to suspect that this HOA's motives went deeper than just flexing authority. There was something else brewing, a real estate development plan most likely. But before I made a move, I needed them to make one more stupid mistake, and they did. 1 week later, I received a legal notice from the HOA's law firm. Any unauthorized access, tampering with the fence, or attempt to enter HOA property will be considered civil trespass and subject to prosecution. I read it again, and then smiled. Perfect. Because now, I didn't just have documentation proving they had encroached on my land. I had written threats, intentional construction on legally protected soil, and evidence of interference with agricultural operations. That night, I finalized the first legal package and sent copies to 3 offices: the County Land Department, the District Attorney's Office, and 1 special copy hand-delivered to Carl Hopkins. No threats, just 1 line attached. Games Tracy. On, Carl, and I'm the one holding the rulebook. The next morning, I sat on my porch, boots up on the railing, mug of black coffee in hand, and an old topographic survey spread across my lap. Ranger lay at my feet, head tilted like he could sense something big was coming. And he was right. Wasn't just going to respond to the HOA's trespass. I was going to rewrite the map. You see, most folks think owning a ranch means owning just your house and your fields. But out here in Arizona, land ownership is a chess game, and I've spent enough years in the Army Engineering Corps to know how to play it smarter than most. First thing I did was make a quiet call to my old buddy Travis, works over at the County Land Records Office. Told him I needed every parcel surrounding Twin Creeks pulled up, zoning maps, plat lines, deed histories, water access. I wanted it all. Planning a little weekend project, he joked. I just said, let's call it a territorial rebalancing. By noon, I was staring at digital gold. Turns out the HOA had built their homes on a patchwork of lots owned by separate shell companies, some still legally tied up in messy inheritance disputes, some delinquent on taxes, some technically without. Proper road easement filings. And the crown jewel? A 40-acre strip of undeveloped scrubland directly bordering my ranch and surrounding the entire back half of Twin Creeks. It was listed as Community Recreation Reserve, but the original owner? Deceased. No next of kin. And the taxes? 8 years unpaid. I drove to the county tax assessor's office that same day. Bought the whole 40 acres at auction for less than what Carl probably pays annually to wax his BMW. But I wasn't done. Over the next 2 weeks, I bought 3 more adjacent parcels, quietly, legally, and with cash. By the time Carl and his HOA board realized what was happening, I had locked down every undeveloped acre that touched Twin Creeks. Their manicured neighborhood had just become a donut, and I was the whole. And then came the fun part. I had a dozen signs printed. Private. Landscape easement, entry by permit only. Mounted them on custom steel posts along every edge of my new land. Even hired a local landscaping company to make it look official. Fancy mulch, solar lights, native plants with Latin name tags. It looked like a conservation zone. It was a fortress of pettiness. One Saturday morning, Carl drove out in his golf cart, yes, his actual golf cart, with that HOA smirk plastered on his face. Until he saw the signs, he slammed on the brakes. "You can't do this," he barked. I sipped from my thermos. "Do what, Carl?" "This land. It's part of our greenbelt." "No, Carl. This land is part of my investment portfolio. You can check the county records if you're unsure." His face flushed red. He tried to pull the shared access card again. I handed him a laminated map with every plot labeled Walker Trust Private. That night, I sent out certified letters to every Twin Creeks homeowner, informing them of my newly established landscape use agreement, a requirement to cross or access any part of the land surrounding their community. Annual fee, $1,800. Carl's jaw must have hit the HOA boardroom table. 3 days later, he called a community meeting. The footage of it leaked online. You could hear him saying, "This is extortion," while a dozen residents yelled back, "Then why did you block his gate?" They knew. They saw it for what it was, and I wasn't done yet. I updated my LLC paperwork, registered the land under Triple Creek Holdings. New name, new rules. Every landscaping truck, every HOA maintenance cart, every dog walker. Now officially crossing my property, so I did what any patriotic landowner would do. I tripled their dues, because out here we don't build fences for control. We build boundaries that bite back. And the HOA? They were about to find out what it meant to pick, a fight with someone who not only knows the law, but owns the dirt beneath their feet. A week after I sent out the landscape use agreement, I got served. Some low-level HOA lawyer from Scottsdale dropped off a cease and desist letter at my gate like he was delivering Holy Scripture. The letter claimed my signage was threatening, my fees unjustified, and my landscaping hostile. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee on the dashboard of my Polaris. "You want to talk hostile, Carl? Let's talk about welding shut a man's only ranch gate." I didn't even bother responding directly. Instead, I forwarded the letter to my legal bulldog, Olivia Klein, a retired federal land use prosecutor who now runs her own firm in Phoenix and enjoys nothing more than crushing fake authorities in court. She read the letter, chuckled, and said, "Let's bury them in filings." Over the next 48 hours, we drafted 4 separate counterclaims: trespassing and obstruction of access, based on HOA's unauthorized barricade, property damage for concrete poured over my access road without consent, harassment and interference with lawful agricultural operations, tied to their mailers, gate block and threats, defamation, because apparently Carl had been telling people I was dangerous, militia adjacent, and unstable. "Buddy, I'm a retired Army engineer. I build bridges until someone burns them." And Carl, he was playing with matches. Meanwhile, the landscape use fees started rolling in. Turns out not every Twin Creeks resident wanted to join Carl's crusade. Some of them were just trying to walk their dogs or access the hiking trails behind my ridge. So when I offered a 50% discount for early sign-up on access permits, you bet your last HOA dues they lined up fast. Within 10 days, over half the community had voluntarily opted into my program. I had homeowners asking me to expand the trails. Others offered to help plant trees. One woman even brought me brownies and said, "Thank you for standing up to Carl. He fined my son for leaving his basketball out." I started keeping track of all the stories, Carl's citations, threats, intimidation tactics, and I passed them along to Olivia. We compiled over 25 resident affidavits. And just like that, Carl's iron grip began to rust. But Carl didn't give up. No, sir. Instead, he doubled down, called an emergency HOA board meeting and tried to pass something called the Perimeter Defense Initiative. Sounded more like a military op than a landscaping policy. The idea? Build a new fence inside my landline. Hide from the truth. Pretend. My parcels didn't exist. Problem was, the land still belonged to me. So when their contractor showed up and tried to drive posts into my soil, he got a visit from the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, courtesy of a call from yours truly. They confiscated his equipment on the spot. No permit, no survey, no legal leg to stand on. Carl came storming up my driveway 30 minutes later in his stupid white BMW, screaming that I was ruining the community. I calmly handed him a manila envelope. Inside, a full packet of notarized deeds, GIS maps, title insurance, and the HOA's own founding charter, which clearly stated their jurisdiction ended 15 feet before my original gate. He ripped the packet in half right there on my gravel drive. I smiled, because now he wasn't just fighting me, he was fighting the truth. That night, I got a call from a local reporter with AZ Now News who'd caught wind of the HOA that tried to wall out a war. Vet. I didn't seek media attention, but I gave him one quote that made the headline the next morning. They blocked my gate. I bought their backyard, and now they pay me rent to walk their dog. The comments exploded. Veterans, ranchers, city folks who hate HOA nonsense. People from all over the country chimed in. You're a hero. HOA justice done right. Where can I buy the t-shirt? But I wasn't looking for praise. This wasn't revenge, it was a lesson. Because sometimes the only way to deal with bullies is in khaki shorts and clipboards, is to own the dirt they stand on. I didn't say a word when the county auction started. I just sat there on the back bench, arms folded, hat pulled low. The Twin Creeks HOA had shown up all cocky, Carl in a blue blazer that didn't fit, clipboard in hand, and two of his loyal lapdogs from the board. They thought they were here to bid on an undeveloped parcel bordering their subdivision, Lot 47. They had no idea. Lot 47 wasn't just dirt and cactus. It was the key to everything. See, what Carl didn't know was that Lot 47 included the only easement they were using to legally access their own community's sewer maintenance route. You heard that right. Without that easement, every flush in Twin Creeks would have nowhere to go. I bought that lot for $34,500. Cash. No one else bid. The HOA reps barely even blinked. They didn't realize what just happened. But I sure did. Because 2 days later, I submitted a notice of intent to develop a livestock composting facility on my newly purchased parcel. Agricultural use, zoned and legal. And oh yeah, it came with access rights. And I also filed to revoke any assumed easements unless renegotiated through a paid lease. Now Carl started paying attention. He called me 3 times that day. Left 4. Voicemails. I didn't answer. I was busy, marking out survey stakes, setting up cameras, and calling my lawyer. When Carl finally showed up at the ranch gate in person, he was fuming. You can't do this, he shouted through the bars of the very barricade he installed. I stepped out with a coffee in hand and my black lab ranger sitting calmly at my side. Actually, I said, I already did. That's when he shoved a stack of papers through. The gate, something about HOA emergency action, easement claims, municipal appeal codes. I skimmed the first page and laughed. You want to appeal my use of my land? I said. Be my guest. I'll let the county zoning board laugh you out of the room. Oh, and while you're at it, expect a notice this week. Your subdivisions, sewer line crosses my land. Effective next month, that lease is being reevaluated. Carl went pale. He stammered something about community health and safety, about shared resources. I didn't flinch. This is Arizona, I said. Out here, we respect the land, not paper tyrants in embroidered polo shirts. Then I turned and walked back toward my porch. Ranger barked once, and Carl flinched. 2 days later, the HOA board held an emergency meeting. Lucy, a neighbor who worked in the county clerk's office, gave me the inside scoop. Apparently, Carl had to explain why a retired Army engineer now owned the sewer access lot, was building a legal composting facility, and had filed to revoke community road easement rights. Let's just say, it didn't go well. Residents were furious, not just because of the legal risk, but because of the money. That's the part I hadn't mentioned yet. Alongside the development notice, I also bought 2 more parcels along the main road into Twin Creeks. I didn't block them, not physically. That would have been illegal. But I did file a petition to establish private toll access for maintenance vehicles crossing those roads. Nothing crazy. Just a $300 annual fee per household. I even offered a discount if paid up front. Carl called it extortion. I called it economics. And the residents? They started turning on him. Fast. Because when your HOA dues jump from $100 a month to nearly $400 just to cover new lease access fees, folks start asking real questions. Questions like, who picked this fight? Who blocked that ranch gate? And who forgot to check the land records before putting up steel barricades? Carl's perfect little power structure started crumbling faster than a termite-ridden fence post. And me? I sat on my porch every morning, coffee in hand, watching trucks drive past with new respect. They didn't honk, they didn't block, and they sure didn't flash fake authority. Ranger and I just watched, because the trap I'd laid was closing. And Carl? He had no idea how bad it was about to get. When I showed up to the county office the next morning, I wasn't just a rancher anymore. I was a man with a mission, and the law behind me. The documents in my hands weren't just pages. They were weapons. Proof of how Twin Creeks HOA, under Carl Hopkins's leadership, had violated zoning codes, built unauthorized infrastructure, and, most damning, erected their steel barricade on land that I now owned. I'd done more than just buy back my access. I had purchased every single parcel along the southern boundary of Twin Creeks. Thanks to a handful of struggling investors looking to offload property, I now owned the greenbelt, the jogging trail, and even the damn sign welcoming residents to peaceful luxury living. Carl didn't know it yet, but the moment he welded that fence shut, he welded the door open on his own downfall. I filed an official complaint with the county's Planning and Zoning Commission. They knew me. I wasn't just Randy Walker, ex-Army. I was the guy who volunteered to rebuild flood barriers 3 years ago, the guy who helped draft the veteran-friendly land use policy. When they saw what I'd brought them, blueprints, satellite, overlays, and documented footage of the illegal barricade, heads started turning. Back at the ranch, Ranger was pacing the porch. He always knew when something was coming, and sure enough, it did. That evening, as I was hauling hay toward the barn, a silver SUV rolled up the drive like it owned the place. Out stepped Carl. His buttoned-up polo had been replaced with a windbreaker that screamed, "Damage control." His mouth moved fast, but I didn't say a word. I let him talk himself into a hole. "Listen," he started, adjusting his clipboard. "There's been some confusion over property designations. Let's not escalate this further." I raised an eyebrow. "Confusion?" I asked slowly. "You welded a steel gate across my ranch." Carl swallowed. "We had reason to believe. The road was within HOA jurisdiction. You mean the land I bought?" I interrupted. "The land you've been trespassing on. The land you're currently standing on." Carl hesitated. Then the anger crept in. "This is blackmail. We're going to challenge your ownership." I smiled, slow and cold. "Good, because I already filed a cease and desist, and while you were busy filing anonymous complaints to code enforcement, I was busy with something else, tripling the HOA land usage lease." Carl's eyes widened. "You can't." "Oh, I can," I replied. "Effective next quarter, your dues triple for every square foot of communal ground that now falls under my legal ownership, and I've got title documents, video evidence, and county approvals to back every inch of it." He looked like someone had yanked the rug out from under him. "This isn't over," he muttered. "It is for you," I said. "The only thing left to decide now is whether you want to go down quietly or have every resident in Twin Creeks read about how their president got them triple-dinged because he couldn't leave a rancher alone." He stormed off without another word. By sundown, I was back on the porch, sipping black coffee as Ranger curled up at my feet. The sky was painted in shades of orange and fire, the way only Arizona knows how to do. I wasn't a man who sought revenge. But I damn sure believed in justice. The next morning, the local paper picked up the story. Rancher turns tables on HOA, triples community dues after land battle. My phone lit up like a Christmas tree. Neighbors, former servicemen, even a few HOA board members who were quietly tired of Carl's antics called to thank me. Some of them asked for advice. Some offered to testify if it came to a court battle. I wasn't just holding the deed to their trails. I was holding the truth. And people were starting to realize that. Then, 2 nights later, I found something slipped under my gate, a manila envelope. Inside? A cease and desist from the HOA's lawyer. A thinly veiled threat asking me to reconsider recent land use decisions in the spirit of neighborhood harmony. Neighborhood harmony. They wanted harmony after welding a gate across my life? I lit a fire in the pit out back, tore that letter in half and watched the pieces burn. They had no idea. This wasn't over. It was just starting. I didn't sleep much that night, not because I was afraid, but because I knew tomorrow would be the end, either for me or for them. At dawn, I brewed my coffee, slipped into my old jeans and worn leather belt, and stepped out onto the porch like I had for years. Ranger lay quietly at my feet, ears perked, eyes fixed on the dirt road, the place where all of this began. On the table, I laid out the updated property maps. Next to them, the new usage fee notices, the ownership certificate, and the packet I had delivered to every Twin Creeks resident the day before. And right on cue, 9 a.m., they came. Carl Hopkins led the group, face even more twisted than usual. Behind him were around 40 Twin Creeks residents, some in suits, others in hiking, shorts, a few with their eyes downcast, as if they knew something was about to collapse. "I'm not here to talk," Carl started, his voice raspy. "I'm here to protest your outrageous fees and threats to our community." I didn't respond right away. Instead, I quietly laid a copy of the newly certified deed on the table. "I'm not threatening anyone. I'm simply charging for the use of what now legally belongs to me. Every trail you walk, every HOA sign you bolt into the ground, every lamp post you light up is on my land now, and I'm only doing what your HOA once did to me." Carl's fists clenched. "You're dividing people. This isn't justice. This is revenge." I met his eyes squarely. "You locked the gate to my ranch with welded steel, sunk 3 feet into the ground, and posted signs that said no entry without HOA approval. I'm a former Army engineer. I don't respond with tears. I respond with the law." A woman in the crowd spoke up, voice trembling. "Mr. Walker, is it true you now own the trail behind the park?" I nodded. "And the hill where you host your annual festivals?" "I don't want to block anyone from using those. But starting today, if you want to keep them, you'll pay triple maintenance fees." Murmurs rippled through the group. Heads lifted. The anger began to shift, replaced with realization. They weren't victims. They had simply stayed silent for too long while the HOA abused power. Carl raised his voice suddenly. "I'll sue." "You," I gave a thin smile. "Then sue the land office, my legal firm, and the local zoning commission too, because they're all in agreement." At that moment, a black pickup pulled up. Out stepped my attorney, Charlotte Dean, carrying official. Contracts for each household. Either agree to the new terms, or forfeit the right to use any land the HOA had once wrongfully claimed. "You have 30 days to decide," Charlotte said firmly. "After that, any unauthorized structures on Mr. Walker's land must be removed." Carl looked around, and for the first time, he realized no one was standing behind him. The crowd thinned. Some residents stepped up to sign immediately. Others simply nodded, quietly thanked me, and walked away. That afternoon, Ranger and I walked through the southern field. The Arizona sky burned in hues of crimson and gold. The old dirt road leading to the meadow, the one the HOA had blocked, was now clear, wide open. No more warning signs, no more cold steel. We stopped beneath the old oak, where my grandfather once tied a rope swing for me as a boy. I placed my hand on its rough bark and closed my eyes. This was why I fought, not for money. Not for pride, but for blood. Because this land is not something to be bargained with. When the HOA built that fence, they thought they were stopping one man. They didn't know they were waking a legacy. The fences are gone now. The residents of the Twin Pines HOA are no longer ruled by self-appointed power brokers. They no longer pay for enforced regulations. They pay for the very land they live on, managed by the man who actually owns it. I didn't do this for money. I did it for principle, for my father, for my grandfather, men who sweat over every inch of this soil, and for any HOA that thinks they can step onto someone else's land without consequence. Remember this: not everyone in a cowboy hat is just a farmer. Some wear the hat and carry the deed in their hand.